vocal variety and use of body language. We have a speaker today. Just let me just share my screen. One minute. Distinguished Toastmaster Padmakumar is a university gold medalist in his bachelor's and master's degree in management from Madurai Kamaraj University. He has over 25 years of experience in large corporates handling, corporate planning, business development, and operations excellence. He started his career with Hindustan Unilever Limited as a territory sales in charge in the personal products division. He was part of the senior management team of multinational companies like Unilever, CMC, HTC, Maersk, and Microsoft. He's an author, mentor, a corporate consultant, and a guest lecturer at various colleges in India and abroad. He's an accredited coach and a DTM. And he was a former division director of Toastmasters International. Today, he's going to take us through a beautiful session on how to use vocal variety and body language. With a round of applause, I welcome distinguished Toastmaster Padmakumar. The stage is yours. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Pramod, for that kind introduction. I'm just sharing my screen. Can you kindly let me know when you're able to see my screen?
It's visible now.
All right. All right. So I heard Pramod wishing you good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Am I to assume that there are people in various time zones attending this meeting? Or is it primarily the India time zone?
Yes, we have various people from different time zones.
Okay, great. So then I will repeat what Pramod said. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on the globe today. All right. So first of all, congratulations on signing up for Speechcraft. I have seen a lot of people who started their journey with Speechcraft and have gone on to become very, very eminent Toastmasters. And some of them are very, very close friends of mine. And they speak very highly of the Speechcraft program, which is a very accelerated program that provides a very short time the abilities that you need to really become great speakers. Today, the focus is going to be on a topic called vocal variety and body language. Let me tell you what the importance of this is. For example, all of us know that climate change is something that is staring us in the eye. It's a very grave kind of a danger that the entire world is focused on. However, in spite of the fact that right from 1980s onwards, the advocacy for climate change has been going on, and even very, very senior people like the presidential nominee for US, Al Gore, being one of the people who really advocated this. In spite of that, we still find that a lot of people are very skeptical about climate change. One of the reasons for this is that people who were presenting about the danger that we are facing have not been very effective in communicating the message to the general population emphatically enough. Most of it was just data presented by people who were climate scientists who did not quite understand the importance of how exactly a good speech has got to be delivered. So that is the importance of vocal variety and body language. If you deliver even a very, very serious topic without the power that vocal variety and body language gives, then you will not get the impact that you want from the speeches that you give. So we will talk about both these topics, the vocal variety and body language. Let's start with part one, which is vocal variety. Why is it that we need vocal variety? Look at it like the background music for a song. Would you be interested in listening to any of the Bollywood numbers without the background music? Obviously not, right? It's the background music that elevates the quality of the song. By the same token, you can look at vocal variety as something that adds to the variety, that adds to the flavor of the speech. Secondly, it creates interest and excitement in people. For example, if I were to say it creates interest and excitement, that's one thing. But if I say it creates interest and excitement, then it takes it to a completely different level, right? Third, it is used to emphasize the key parts of a speech. The key parts of a speech. The words that you emphasize are the words that remain in the minds of people. Fourthly, it creates characterization and depth. We will talk a little more about characterization, but in your speech, if there are multiple characters involved, vocal variety is a good way to distinguish between these characters and give them depth and personality. We will see a little more of this as we go along. It shows cultivation and authority. People who have good vocal variety, when they are on the stage, when they are talking to an audience, you feel convinced about their capability, about their depth in the subject. Irrespective of how long they have spoken, the very fact that they are able to use vocal variety effectively communicates their expertise on the topic within the first couple of minutes itself. And as Toastmasters, we all know how important it is to make a good start, a great impression right at the beginning so that you get the attention of the audience for the long term. It also conveys knowledge and our own interest in the subject. The passion for whatever we are speaking about comes through when we are effectively using vocal variety. It gets listeners to engage, to connect, to feel motivated, inspired, and also convinces them about the topic that we are talking about. Now you can relate back to what I said in the introduction, that climate change advocates have not been effective in communicating and connecting with the audience and talking about the ill effects of ignoring climate change, essentially because they have not been able to use vocal variety or body language effectively. It also evokes passion, both in the speaker and in the listener. It is something that really provides that fuel for people to really pay attention to the topic being discussed. So we have enough and more reasons on why vocal variety should be focused on. Moving on, where do we use vocal variety? It is relevant in equal measure even when you are having a face-to-face conversation with one person. But of course, you will not use too heavy or dramatic when you are talking one-to-one with somebody. Otherwise, you know what people will say, oh my God, this guy is really trying to over-project or overemphasize certain things. Therefore, we need to calibrate the level of vocal variety depending on the size of the audience. But at the same time, we must recognize that even for a face-to-face conversation, it is important for us to recognize the importance of vocal variety. Even in a phone conversation, let's say you have somebody at the other end of the phone, if you want them to remain engaged, and if you want the message you're conveying to be sticky, that is, for the person to remember what you're conveying, vocal variety plays a very, very significant role. Even in a speech to a small group like what we are doing today, 15, 20 people or 25 people, or it is a performance for a large audience on a stage let's say like Toastmasters International Conference, 3,000 people sitting and watching you, even in that context, the vocal variety is something which is extremely crucial. Even when you are in a TV or radio show where you don't get to see the audience, you are talking into a microphone, you are facing a camera, but still it's very important for us to recognize the importance of vocal variety. So as we
Sir, you are on mute. You are on mute. Hello?
yeah. Am I audible now?
You are audible, but the screen is not there. I think
Yeah.
screen
I'm
is...
going to share the screen. I don't know why it dropped off, but I'm going to share it again. Is it visible now?
Yes, it is visible now. Yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry about that glitch. The line dropped for a second. Now, as you can see, in practically all of the contexts, vocal variety plays an important role. Yeah. So think about it during the Q&A. If you have any situation where you have a doubt whether vocal variety will indeed be valid, we can talk about that during the Q&A. Moving forward, we talked about the why and we talked about the where. Now we come to the how. How do we make sure that we use vocal variety? There are certain things like the pace at which we talk, the projection we make to our words, the pitch that we use for various parts of our speech. How effectively do we pause and how do we use the pronunciation in our speech? All of these factors become very crucial in adding to the vocal variety. For example, if I were talking about being chased by a dog as we are running and running really fast, then obviously the pace of the speech has got to be at a certain level. But if I'm talking about walking in the park with a loved one, holding hands under a full moon, and touching the rose flowers as I'm walking, obviously the pace has got to be very slow. So matching the pace with the content or what we are conveying is one of the best ways of ensuring that your vocal variety is appropriate. The projection, the way I'm saying the projection, you can see that I'm projecting this so that it really stays intact in your minds. Yeah. So the way we project some of the words is very crucial. The pitch that we use, important to ensure that just like in singing, you start with a certain pitch because you know to what extent you have to take that pitch, how high you will have to take that pitch, and how low you have to take the pitch. How high? So high that it should really be audible to the last person in the audience, and at the same time, not irritating the person who is sitting in the front row. That's a fair balance. That's a great balance that we have to achieve. Yeah. Similarly, pronunciation can help in terms of differentiating various characters. If in your speech you have a father and a son conversation, you can use different types of pronunciation to communicate whether the father is, let's say, a vernacular educated person, middle-aged person with not much of exposure to the urban environment, whereas the son is a very sophisticated IT services worker, right? You can use the difference in pronunciation in the dialogues that they are having with each other in order to add a lot of variety. So characters with specific kind of, the vocal variety. Imagine a giggling baby. It's able to communicate whether it needs milk or it needs you to play with it or it needs you to pick it up. It is able to convey just through the giggles because of the variation in the type of giggles that it has. So very early we really learn how to use vocal variety to get what we want. Similarly, if you are having a character of a king, for example, there has to be a commanding voice. You have to make it a gruff, deep voice. It cannot be a squeaky voice. Yeah. Similarly, for a slave, it should be a servile kind of a tone, not too loud, not the kind of a tone that you would use for a king talking. Yeah. Similarly, for an adolescent, you can use kind of tentative tone so that you communicate the unsure nature of the thought that an adolescent may have. You can use a husky tone to communicate a girl, particularly if a girl is in love with somebody. Using a husky tone communicates that emotion very well. And boastful for a dashing young man. So as you can see, depending on the character, you can decide what type of vocal variety to use, which will add to the personality profile that you are trying to project. So all of these and more would communicate the how part of it. Yeah. So we talked about the why, we talked about the where, we talked about the how, and now let's focus on the pause. A pause, just if you notice, I paused before filling the sentence, right? Because I want you to pay attention to what I'm going to say. So pause is a very good way of drawing attention to what you're going to say. Yeah, so it builds up the drama. It adds suspense to what you're saying. It helps you to deliver a punchline. They say that a pause has got to be pregnant. Why pregnant? Because after the pause, you got to deliver. So remember, using pause very effectively before you give a punchline is something that adds tremendously to vocal variety. So just before you say anything profound or important or special, make sure to have a pause and create the expectancy in people. With practice, we will learn how to ensure that our pauses add a lot of value. Like they say in music, it is not just the notes that provide the richness, it is the space between the notes, the silence between the notes that add to the quality of the music. By a similar token, in a speech, a pause adds a lot of value. So that is about vocal variety. In the interest of time, I'm going to switch on to the body language part of it. And at the end of it, if you have any questions on either topic, we can spend some time. Yeah. So why? Again, why body language? Professor Meherbian did a study and he found that in what we communicate, only 7% weightage is for the words that we speak. 7%. The balance 93% is the vocal variety or the tone of voice and the body language. Can you imagine how much we would lose out if we do not pay enough attention to the tone of voice and body language? And within this, 38% is the tone of voice and 55% is the body language. Now, I do realize that in a Zoom screen, it's very difficult to have a lot of body language, but still within the constraints of that screen, it's important for us to ensure that we use body language to communicate the power of what we wanted to say. So it enhances the impact of the message. It helps people to remember what you're communicating. It always conveys the intent of what we want to communicate and the emotion that we want to communicate. And to a great extent, integrity. So when I say integrity with an accompanying body language, it is much more powerful than just saying integrity. So that's the why of body language. What is body language? The gestures that we use, for example, hands always above the hips. Do not just allow the hands to hang or put it into your pocket. Use gestures, not necessarily always coordinated, synchronous gestures of the right hand and the left hand. Sometimes it's only one hand. Have variety in terms of the gestures. But more important, recognize that facial expressions like lifting of eyebrows or pursing of the lips, or if it is possible for you, kind of twitching of the nose or twitching of the ear. All these are additional elements that we can use to convey what we want to convey. Eye contact. It's very important. How long should eye contact be is a question that a lot of people have. My suggestion is don't stare too long at one person's eyes. Look at a person's eyes only as long as you're conveying one particular point or maybe a sentence, then move on to the next person. Make sure everybody in the audience gets equal benefit of having eye contact with you. The stage orchestration, particularly if it's a physical setting and you have a physical stage on which you're giving the speech, it's very useful to have orchestration of your entire speech. What part of your speech happens in what part of the stage? And the emotional and contextual consistency. When you're talking about a sad thing, your voice should also communicate that it's a sad emotion. Yeah, and when you're tapping into the thrill of finding something new, then there should be the thrill in the body language as well as in the vocal. Yeah, so that's the what. And let's take a quick guess at the non-verbals communicated in these 4 figures. If you look at figure 2 very closely, you will find that it is communicating, I don't agree what you're saying. Whereas figure 2 says, how is this relevant? A quizzical expression says, how is this relevant to what we are talking about? Figure 4 is, when will this end? When will this guy shut his mouth and go? Yeah, and figure 5 says, that looks interesting. So observing the reactions of the audience is a very good way of ensuring that we also capture the essence of what is the current mood of the audience. Yeah, and avoid things like nail biting, locked ankles, rapid blinking, tapping or drumming fingers. For example, holding a pen in your hand and twisting it back and forth. All these convey nervousness. And adopt a power posture. Have a power posture. Smile and let the smile reach your eyes as well. And we already discussed eye contact and the right duration for eye contact. And gestures mostly above your waist. 70-75% of the time, if your hands are visible, even when you're on a Zoom screen, that is very good. And look interesting. Your audience will reflect the emotions that you display. Now, one of the best ways to learn this is through Navrasas. I won't spend too much time on this, except to say that we all know the Sringara Rasa, which is the romance, the Hasya Rasa, which is the laughter, the Karunya Rasa, which is compassion. We have Raudra, which is anger, the Veera, which is bravery, the Bhayanaka, which is fear. We have the Vibhatsa, which is disgust, the Adbhuta, which is wonder, and Shanta, that is peace. Practice in these Navrasas in front of the mirror if you really want to improve your body language, where it's not just use of hands and jumping around back and forth, but conveying what you want to convey through your facial expressions. Yeah. So you can also mimic children. For example, they are very good at having different kind of vocal varieties and body language. And if you lose your inhibitions, drop your inhibitions and practice, mimic actors. Check out inside the room and in an auditorium. And if you write a script of a speech, on the left margin, leave enough space to make some notes on what is the vocal variety you will deploy and what is the hand gestures or other kind of body language you're going to use. And while you practice delivering the speech, you can have your notes on what you're going to incorporate in this. Yeah. So overall, put life into your speech. That is the essence of what I wanted to convey to you. And now open for any questions if we have time.
Thank you, distinguished Toastmaster Padmakumar. I'm sure that there will be quite a lot of questions from the side of audience. It's time to ask questions, clarify your doubt.
I think Rajiv Srinivas has raised his hand.
Yes.
Thank you so much for this wonderful session on vocal variety and body language. I was so years in all this. I have a question that I usually hear from all my mentees as well. This is like, yeah, when a person has got low volume, how can he or she work upon so that he or she is audible to the audience? Let's say it's 20 or 50 if there is no mic sitting. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. In fact, if you have seen some of these Carnatic singers, they go to the beach and practice early in the morning. And that is one of the best ways to develop your voice in such a way. And there are trainers, vocal trainers, who also help you to understand how to bring things from your bowel rather than from your lips. Yeah, but it takes a lot of practice. However, I would recommend that where it is available, please ask for a microphone. Several times we hesitate or we forget to ask for a microphone. The organizers definitely sometimes make the arrangements if you ask for it. So if you know that your voice is of, low volume, and if you want to address a large gathering like 25, 30, 50 people, check with the organizers whether there is a possibility. And as you become proficient speakers, if required, you can even invest in a small microphone yourself. Those column mics kind of a thing, which is not very expensive, very, very inexpensive. But that is, of course, if you have a lot of speaking assignments, and you don't want to depend on the organizers arranging a mic for you. Anyone else?
Yes.
Rajat, go ahead.
Thank you very much for this wonderful speech. Actually, I have a question regarding the voice modulation we are using. There are two kind of situations. The one is when we are delivering a speech, and other is a professional setting when I'm talking about, suppose I'm sitting for an interview. So in such a case, definitely generally the personal story makes an impact. But in a professional setting, what kind of vocal variety I can focus on so that I don't sound that was so much dramatic, as well as at the same time I can be expressive, and that my emotions came with my speech or came with my answer. So that is how can I tone down based on situation?
Absolutely, Rajat, that's a brilliant question. See, problem is basically when somebody does not deploy any expressiveness or any amount of vocal variety when it comes to, let's say, answering in an interview or in a team meeting and things like that. There are a lot of people who use a calm, a monotone throughout the entire discussion, either in terms of providing the answer like I'm doing right now. I'm not using any vocal variety. I'm actually using a very monotonous voice just to demonstrate to you how ineffective it can be. But even in a one-to-one conversation, now I'm shifting. As you can see, I'm now shifting. But even in a one-to-one conversation, if I'm able to use the power of vocal variety and pause at the appropriate moments, I can bring in more life into our conversations. So even in one-to-one conversation, whether it's an interview setting or in a small team kind of a meeting, there is still scope for us to use vocal variety. As you said, you cannot make it over dramatic. You don't want to make it over the top. That's not the idea. But don't hesitate to bring the right level of vocal variety into what is. Does it answer your question?
Yes, got some point to work. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Meena, do you have your hand up? You have a question?
Yes, I have two questions. One, when it comes to stage usage while we are speaking in person, how do we use the entire stage while we share our story? And second question is with respect to vocal variety. While we are constantly practicing our speeches, we tend to have a monotone. So how do we overcome that and bring in vocal variety?
Yeah. So great questions. One is in terms of stage orchestration. First of all, you should be aware of what your stage is or your speaking area is. In physical setting, sometimes you get a large stage, sometimes you get a not too large kind of a stage. You must be aware what is the size of the stage. Secondly, in your speech, for example, let's say I'm talking about my life story. I'm talking about as a student, what is the experience, as a young adult, what has been the experience, and currently in the recent past, what's been my experience. I can potentially use 3 different physical parts of the stage to communicate that story. Because if I were to go back to my school days at some point in the speech, I can always get back to that same area. And in the minds of the audience, I'm kind of positioning that, okay, this space is where I talk about my school days. This space is where I talk about my young adult space. This space is what I talk about, is where I talk about what I'm doing. This is only one example. But not all speeches of ours talk about childhood, adult, and right? It's not that. You can also use the same strategy if you have, let's say, 3 different points to communicate. Okay, so the point number 1, you can communicate from one part, point number 2 from another part, point number 3 from another part. This is another way in which you can orchestrate. The third way you can orchestrate is, for example, if there are 2 players or 2 actors or 2 characters that you are depicting as a part of your speech. For example, you're talking about yourself and a truck driver and an interaction that happened with a truck driver. You can position yourself in one part as if you are kind of, holding on to the door of the truck when you're talking as a truck driver, and then move a step away and then talk as yourself. That's another way in which you can use the stage orchestration. By and large, remember that it is also imagining in your own mind how that scene will look. That itself will give you tips in terms of how you can do the stage orchestration. Yeah, but at the same time, I am not a great fan of overuse of this by jumping around. And there are some people who do push-ups and pull-ups and all those kind of things, which is, to my mind, I mean, sorry to use this term, but those are monkey tricks. I wouldn't recommend that. Ultimately, your elegance on the stage is going to communicate how good a speaker you are. And while you use all of these vocal variety and body language to the extent that it is needed, please avoid overuse, even in terms of running around just because there's a big stage. You keep on shifting here and there without a purpose. No, that wouldn't be advisable. And what was your second question in terms of the vocal variety?
Yeah, while we constantly practice our speech, we tend to lose the emotions that we bring in. How do we overcome that monotone?
So ultimately, we are not just delivering a speech that we have memorized, right? We are internalizing the message and then communicating the message with feeling. When you communicate a message with feeling, the appropriate vocal variety will automatically come. It's only when we, kind of write down the entire speech, memorize the entire speech, and then deliver that speech exactly word for word, that you lose track of what are the appropriate emotions for each part of the speech and what is the appropriate vocal variety for that. But if you have the gist of that speech, or if you really remember what is it you want to convey, and then convey it with your own words, at that stage you will find that the emotions will come out automatically. Because you feel for what you're saying, automatically it will come in. And second thing is, of course, with practice, it becomes very natural. Over time, it becomes much easier to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if there are no further questions, thank you very much for your attention. And I enjoyed bringing this session to you. Wish you all the very best in your journey to become absolutely great and captivating communicators. Thank you so much. Back to you, Pramod.
Thank you, distinguished Toastmaster Padmakumar. It was a wonderful, interesting session. It was very evident from the response of the participants. We look forward to have more sessions from your side. On behalf of the participants and the coordinators of this program, once again, thank you for your time, energy, and enthusiasm. I'm sure that it added some value to all our participants. Thank you so much. Please give a round of applause to our distinguished Toastmaster.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I drop off now?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
We have one more breakout